In Korea, it has been 9 years since the Anti-Corporal Punishment Act was passed. The law prohibits teachers from disciplining their students using corporal punishment or physical harm. However, once the law was adopted, it became increasingly difficult for teachers to manage their unruly students. Survey shows that almost all teachers found the law made their job extremely more difficult. Then one day, a teacher assaulted by a student dies. This sudden development forced the Ministry of Education to pass a new law, this time protecting the teachers. 2 years later, the first part of the law commences. Kyung-in Kim is a normal first-year student going to school. One day, a second-year boy committed suicide right in front of Kim. The boy that died is Dae-seok, a student who was relentlessly bullied in their school. However, instead of being scared, Kim laughed. Why? Because Kim himself is relentlessly getting bullied at school. Bullies beat him up and make a game as to who can make him scream the loudest. They punch him, pinch him, or even sit on him. He tried to tell the teachers before, but they just scolded the students, which made them bully him even more. He overheard from them that the teachers chose to just ignore the problem since the law doesn't give them any authority anyway. With Dae-seok's death, the cops would be involved and maybe the bullying would stop. Unfortunately, no one told the cops anything and they concluded the suicide was due to grades, not bullying. Faced with such difficulty in life, Kim is now on top of the building, contemplating whether he should just jump. Before he can, a man suddenly speaks up from behind him and urges him not to. The man is sitting on the rooftop surveying everything that is happening all around the school. He introduces himself as a new teacher and asks to be brought to the teacher's room. While on the way to the teacher's room, a bully suddenly kicks Kim and starts beating him up. Out of nowhere, the new teacher suddenly slaps the bully and starts disciplining him. The bully warns the new teacher that teachers can't harm students and tells his classmates to start videoing them. However, the new teacher just smiles and continues disciplining him. When the principal arrives, the new teacher introduces himself. He is Warden Hwajin Na of the newly created Teachers' Rights Protection Agency. They give special guidance to delinquent schools, whether it's because of bullies or teachers who cover up suicides in their schools by paying hush money to cops. Moreover, the TRPA has no limits on its educational methods, even if it's for students or teachers alike. Thus, Hwajin Na announces that he'll give their school a true education. After learning who he is, the principal and vice principal try to convince him that their school is free of violence. They even tried bribing Hwajin with an envelope of cash, but he just ignores their excuses and instead asks where the classroom of the student who committed suicide is. In Class 2-5, some goon is trying to make one of his classmates, Byung-soo, drink a bottle full of liquor. They are trying to hide the fact that they themselves are hungover and forced Byung-soo to take the blame. One of these bullies is Jun Yeong, a son of a congressman. Just then, Hwajin Na enters and announces that he'll be their substitute teacher. The students snicker and think that he's no big deal, so Hwajin just starts taking attendance. When he arrives at Dae-seok's name, the bully explains to him that he's already dead. When he reaches Byung-soo, who is drenched in liquor, the bully quickly tells on him for being drunk. However, Hwajin quickly points out that he can smell it more on the bully. The bully gets angry at his accusation, but Hwajin just also asks if he's the bully who pushed Dae-seok to suicide. He then pulls the bully by the lips and drags him in front of the class. He announces that their school has 3 main problems. First, they don't respect their teachers. 2, they bully each other. And 3rd, the school remains complacent with all these. He then introduces himself as Warden Hwajin Na of the TRPA, and he congratulates the student for being their very first case. As a start, Hwajin orders all the students to stand up. However, Jun Yeong orders his classmates to sit down instead. He shouts at them, and all the students sit down in fear. He then smiles at Hwajin and tells him that it seems the students respect him more than Hwajin himself. In response, Hwajin orders Jun Yeong to go in front. When he doesn't, Hwajin calmly goes over to his desk. Before anything happens, Hwajin notices the principal and the vice principal spying on him from outside the classroom. The principal tells Hwajin that he should be careful with Jun Yeong since he's the son of a congressman. Meanwhile, Jun Yeong saunters out of the classroom without any fear of them. Hwajin thanks the principal for the warning, but he just calmly holds Jun Yeong's head and slams him to the ground. He scolds the principal, pointing out that his fear of Jun Yeong makes the students lose respect for their teachers. He then orders the principal to round up the teachers since he has an announcement for them. Meanwhile, Jun Hyun menacingly looks at them from the ground. With all the teachers rounded up, Hwajin announces that they can exercise their authority as he does. He promises that he will take responsibility and opens a cabinet full of disciplining equipment for them to use. The teachers react confused to his announcement, with some apprehensive, while the older teachers gleefully get their old weapons from the cabinet. From that moment on, it is a common sight to see teachers punishing the delinquents in their class, slapping them with sticks, or making them do exercises. Some students fight back, but those get special counseling from Hwajin. After giving his guidance, the students leave his office terrified and apologizing to their teachers. One day, the bullies are having a meeting on the rooftop, and they urge Junyeon to make his dad do something about it. However, he tells them that their school is in the pilot program and it was passed by the Ministry of Education 2 years ago, so his father cannot do anything about it. However, he has a different plan. He calls over Byung-soo to do his plan. Meanwhile, on the school grounds, Hwajin is asking Kim how his school life has been, and Kim happily reports that there has been a lot less bullying. However, he points out that this will only last while Hwajin is in their school, and if he leaves, they'll just go back to their old ways. Their conversation is interrupted when Byung-soo arrives looking like he was beaten up, asking Hwajin for help. Hwajin leads Byung-soo to his office, but out of nowhere, Byung-soo suddenly stabs him, just as Junyeong ordered. Hwajin is shocked by the knife now sticking out of his side, but he just calmly looks at Byung-soo and twists his arm and pulls out the knife. He then brings Byung-soo back to his office and orders him to hold the mirror while he sews up the wound. Thankfully, Byung-soo's inexperience made the wound only shallow. He then intimidates Byung-soo to tell him who ordered it, and when he stays silent, he lets him go, telling him he's just a pushover letting everyone else order him around. Byung-soo cries out, telling him he has no choice since Dae-seok himself failed to stand up against Junyeong. Byung-soo then starts telling the history between Junyeong and Dae-seok. Dae-seok was a popular kid with many friends while Junyeong hung out with the delinquent students. They don't interact until one day, Junyeong was about to hurt a teacher when Dae-seok suddenly punches him in defense of their teacher. From that day on, Dae-seok became the target of bullies, and Junyeong even ordered the other students to make Dae-seok an outcast. What's worse, Junyeong used his father's influence to affect Dae-seok's father's career, who was a government contractor. A few months of bullying later, Dae-seok asked Junyeong if he hadn't done enough, but Junyeong just answered that he will never stop until Dae-seok's dead. Thus, Dae-seok committed suicide. At their school, Junyeong is king. That is why Byung-soo had no choice but to follow his orders. However, after Byung-soo's explanation, he notices that Hwajin wasn't even listening but instead was just sleeping. He tries to make Hwajin understand how big a deal Junyeong is, but Hwajin just looks at his phone and instead shows him something on it. Meanwhile, the bullies are waiting on the rooftop for cops or ambulances to arrive and take away Hwajin. When nothing happened, they assume that Byung-soo probably just ran away instead of following their instructions. Junyeong is thinking about what other plans he should do when Hwajin and Byung-soo suddenly barge onto the rooftop. Byung-soo angrily walks to Junyeong and gives him an uppercut, knocking him down to the ground. After the bullies get over their shock, they are about to manhandle Byung-soo, but Hwajin pulls them over and throws them to the ground. Junyeong is recovering from Byung-soo's punch, but Byung-soo yells at him and tells him he cannot use his dad as a defense anymore. Byung-soo shows him a phone, and in it is news about Junyeong's dad being indicted on charges of bribery and scandal. A few days ago, Hwajin was complaining to his boss about the school he had chosen for their first case. Having the son of a politician as one of its students would surely just make their work harder. However, his boss just lights a cigarette and tells him that Hwajin to focus on his job, while he will handle the dirty work. Back in the present, everyone is surprised at the revelation that Junyeong's dad has criminal cases against him. One of the bullies approaches Junyeong and asks if it is true. Junyeong's childhood has always been a hard one. His father, a prominent politician, always disciplines him whenever he causes trouble or when his grades are low. To his father, Junyeong was an embarrassment of a son. However, his hard life only extends to the walls of his home. Outside, things were very different. Adults and children alike all fawn over him thanks to his connection to his father. Thus, Junyeong started to use his dad's status to make everyone kneel before him. His greatest joy in life was watching others beg for mercy. Unfortunately, something bad happened. One of these people ended his own life. Junyeong feared for his life as he might be sent to prison. However, even the police fawned over him. On that day, he realizes he can do anything. But now he is sitting on the bathroom floor with the other delinquents bullying him now that they know his father's not a big deal anymore. They pour juice on him and even spit on him. After the bullies leave, Hwajin casually exits a bathroom stall. Junyoung angrily shouts at him why he didn't save him from the bullying when it's what the TRPA should be doing. However, Mr. Na just announces that he's leaving their school. Thus, everything went back to the way it was with just one major difference. Everyone is now bullying the once king of their school, Junyoung. Not only that, but even at home, his dad starts beating him up again when an old video of Junyoung's bullying surfaces on the news. With his world crashing down around him, Junyoung decides to just kill everyone who bullied him. In the dead of the night, he goes to the school and pours gasoline all over the hallway. All of a sudden, someone kicks him on the stomach, and he comes crashing down to the ground all drenched in gasoline. It was Hwajin. Hwajin mutters that Junyoung seemed to still haven't realized what he did wrong. He then lights up a cigarette and tells the kid that it's time he learned his lesson. Junyoung is surprised to see Hwajin there, but Hwajin just drops the lit-up lighter at the gasoline Junyoung scattered around the floor and walls. Junyoung panics and tries to get away from the flames, but he soon slips and gets cornered by the blazing inferno. He finally realizes his faults and asks Hwajin for help, who promptly extinguishes the flames with the fire extinguisher. Hwajin then tells Junyoung that learning is something one experiences with one's whole body, not just through words or books. And now Junyoung himself knows what it feels like for his life to turn into a living hell by someone wrongfully using power and authority to gang up on someone and drive them into a corner. By being subjected to his own actions, Junyoung can finally understand what he had done to Daeseok, and him taking real responsibility for everything he has done is precisely the real education Hwajin seeks to impart. However, Hwajin points out that no matter how much responsibility he takes for his actions, there's no bringing back Daeseok, so in that case it's only fair that he makes Junyoung carry the weight of his mistakes for the rest of his life. Hwajin then leaves, with Junyoung contemplating his life and crying. That morning, Hwajin appeared in the news and revealed himself as working for the Ministry of Education. He then divulged all the evidence he collected during his time at Junyoung's school on Junyoung's wrongdoings. Thus, the police took Junyoung in, along with the rest of the bullies who tormented Daeseok, into custody. Not only that, but news of Junyoung's father being expelled from his political party also broke out due to his numerous scandals. Due to all these revelations, the whole country learned about the TRPA and Hwajin's teaching methods. Public opinion and social media are becoming abuzz with criticism or support of the TRPA, including its method of corporal punishment. Meanwhile, the head of the Ministry of Education, Gangster Choi, is preparing himself to face the public through a press conference. His secretary tries to give him a few scripted answers, but the head of the Ministry of Education rejects her help. After all, he points out that it's not his style to predict things and come up with scripts like a coward. Out of nowhere, their car stops since a man is standing in the middle of the street, blocking the way. It was Junyoung's father, Congressman Ryu. Congressman Ryu confronts Gangsuk and asks him if he's the one who leaked his scandals to the press. He asks him why he did such a thing when they were comrades once, but Gangsuk just points out that he should have been a better father. Congressman Ryu is intimidated, for in front of him is Gangsuk Choi, the former head of the ruling party and a veteran politician of 26 years. Gangsuk Choi, the current Minister of Education, is a 69-year-old man and a former congressman for 6 whole terms. He is a sharp-tongued speaker, and unlike every other politician, he wasn't fake. His honest and brash attitude appealed to a lot of people, giving him enough base support that he was always considered to be a viable president of the country. Nevertheless, his brash attitude means he always butts heads with every reporter in Korea. At the start of the press conference, reporters start asking him if he supports corporal punishment and whether this is because of his old-fashioned thinking. Another reporter questions whether his methods are in violation of the rights of the students who now have bruises all over their bodies. In response, Gangsuk points out that the TRPA only works in schools where situations are so out of hand, so he does not support corporal punishments at all. Moreover, they have proof that the schools changed for the better after the TRPA's involvement, so the students themselves show if corporal punishment is an outdated method or not. Furthermore, the rights of the students who want to study must be protected too, not only those students who chose to be bullies. He then announces that if he's the Minister of Education, he will support the TRPA no matter the opposition, so he warns all the parents calling him that they can never change his mind. A few days later, Hwajin is watching his boss' scary interview on the internet. To his surprise, Gangsuk, his dad, is behind him already. Together, they visit and pay respect to the grave of Gyun Choi, the real reason why they started the TRPA. As they are about to leave, Hwajin reveals that his new assignment has already been chosen, Guwon High-Tech High School. Hwajin is curious since normally the principals try to hide their school's problems, but this time, the principal of Guwon Tech himself asked for their help. Thus, Hwajin enters the school, and as soon as he climbs the stairs, 2 groups of high schoolers are having an all-out brawl. The students of the electrical engineering department and the members of the auto engineering department department have crossed paths once again and are at war with each other. All Hwajin must do is stop it. Ever since he was little, Hyunju was a fanatic when it came to cars. He was never interested in robots or anything else, just cars. That is why even when he was a kid, he knew that he wanted to become an auto engineer in the future. But when he finally gets to enroll in an auto engineering department, his dream turns into a nightmare. His whole department is currently in a fistfight with another department, and when another student notices him just standing by the side, he shouts at him to join the fight. Hyunju charges with his fist, but a single punch knocks him out. He really doesn't like his new life, but what can he do? He then notices what seems like a seemingly familiar person in school. Meanwhile, Hwajin meets with the principal of Guwon Tech, who tells him of the power struggle currently going on between the departments. Later, the leader of the auto engineering department, a student named Hwajin, is punishing their members who didn't contribute much to the fight. This includes Hyunju, who was wishing he could go back in time and stop himself from getting into cars in the first place. The hierarchy in Guwon Tech was determined through fights, and despite being the third year, he was in last place. The only way he is surviving is thanks to the auto lessons he loved. Hwajin punishes Hyunju for being a weakling in their department. However, Hwajin suddenly appears and tells Hwajin that school is for learning, not fighting. Not knowing who Hwajin is, Hwajin tries to teach him a lesson, but a single punch from Hwajin sends him down. Hwajin then motions to Hyunju to help him with a plan. Meanwhile, the electrical department is also having a meeting. Their leader, Honki, is motivating his underlings for the upcoming brawl, but the school speakers suddenly blare out with Hyunju speaking that he, the weakest of the auto department, is challenging the whole electrical department. The whole department rushes to the gym to accept Hyunju's challenge, but what welcomes them is a smack from Hwajin's baton. Inside the gym is a makeshift classroom, with the auto engineering department sitting on one side. Hwajin tells the electrical engineering department to take a seat since his class, character education, will be in session. Those who have any complaints can just go to him for a fight. Honki and his goons ask Hwajin who he is, so Hwajin introduces himself. Honki finally recognizes him as the TRPA who's been on the news lately and warns Hwajin that they're not small-time bullies like those at other schools. He then dismisses Hwajin's proclamation and tries to leave, but Hwajin throws his baton at them and tells them they cannot leave. This angers the engineering department, with Honki picking up the baton and rushing at him. However, Hwajin just knocks him out with one blow. The other students were shocked, so they all decided to rush him together at the same time. Meanwhile, Hwajin from the auto department is just smiling at them since they experienced the same thing a while ago. After the whole department gets smacked on them behind by Hwajin, he tells them to go to their seats and hands out test papers. After all, he points out that their school is a place to study, not to fight. Hyunju gets weirded out because the exam is just a basic general knowledge exam, but it seems that he's the only one thinking that way. Everyone else cannot seem to answer the exam. He never really told anyone else, but truthfully, Hyunju is the #1 smartest student in the school. The next day, the whole of Hwajin's class now has a new hierarchy. Some of them are pulling tires while jogging across the field, others are resting by the shade, and one is sitting on a throne. Hwajin's class is now divided based on their grades, with those who have a GPA between 0 and 59 points as the pawns, those who have a GPA of 60 to 90 points as the knights, and the one ruling all over them getting the order is Hyunji, the king, with a GPA of 100 points. Meanwhile, outside the school, a boy is sitting over the bodies of the people he beat up and calls his underling, the electrical engineering student Honki. He informs Honki that his suspension is weirdly finished, with it ending at only 2 weeks when it's supposed to last for a while. When Honki tells him of the TRPA's presence in their school, the boy breaks his cigarette and angrily asks Honki if it's true. The boy is Wonhyuk, the overall rank 1 in Guwon Tech's fighting hierarchy. Meanwhile, the combined auto and electrical engineering class are made to follow a new set of rules. The rules are: class hierarchy is determined by grades, anyone can challenge the instructor, and insubordination in the rankings is not tolerated. Not only that, the knights get to eat good food, the pawns can only eat dry rice and potatoes, and the king dines on gourmet food. Hwajin, annoyed at his experience as only a pawn, throws down his food and challenges Hwajin again as per Rule 2. However, his whole gang easily gets decimated by Hwajin. After class, they try to bully Hyunju, but when Hwajin catches them, he makes them do physical exercises as punishment in front of the king. Hyunju begs Hwajin if he can step down as king because he knows that the moment Hwajin leaves, everyone would kill him for being the king. However, Hwajin promises that once he's done with their school, he won't need to be scared ever again. Meanwhile, Honki asks Hwajin why he's trying to keep fighting against Hwajin. He tells him that they should rejoice because the #1 of their school, Wonhyuk, is finally returning, and he will surely put Hwajin in his place. Suddenly, the door to the gymnasium rattles and shakes as someone from outside tries to enter. The doorknob breaks, and when the door opens, Wonhyuk enters wielding a hammer he used to break down the door. However, instead of being scared, Hwajin smiles and welcomes Wonhyuk. After all, he was the one who requested the principal to end his suspension and let him go back to school. However, Gwanyuk just puts down his bag and punches Hwajin, which he thankfully was able to block. Gwanyuk points at Hwajin's rules and tells that he wants to challenge Hwajin. Hwajin stares at him with blood on his lips from Gwanyuk's punch, but still smiles and happily accepts his challenge. At the start of the fight, Hwajin manages to dodge Gwanyuk's punch and delivers one of his own. However, instead of going down, Gwanyuk endures his punch and slams Hwajin's head down to the ground, knocking him unconscious. It turns out that Gwanyuk is a living legend in their school. Even when they were just first years, he managed to claw his way up the food chain of Guan Tech. Not only that, when other schools start belittling their students because a freshman was king, Gwanyuk showed them who's boss. He had earned the title of #1 powerhouse in the district. Their infamy became so wide that they were able to match the past legendary status of their school. Before their school was known as Guan Tech, it was known as Guan Vocational High, and Guan Vocational High ruled over their district with an iron fist, getting dubbed as the Guan Mongol Army. But with Gwanyuk as strong as he is now, they can surely surpass that. The students celebrate Gwanyuk's victory against Hwajin and start chanting his name. Meanwhile, Hwajin compliments Gwanyuk and calls down on Hyeonju to receive his punishment for strutting around as their king the past few days. However, Gwanyuk suddenly punches Hwajin and Honki, scolding them for bowing down to Hwajin in the first place. He then announces that he will start conquering their whole district under his iron fist. Gwanyuk then notices a laugh coming from behind him. It was Hwajin, who was just pretending to be knocked out. Gwanyuk attacks Hwajin again, but this time, Hwajin elbows him in the chest, cracking his ribs. With a cracked rib, Gwanyuk won't be able to punch his way out of things for a couple of weeks, and thus Hwajin assigns him to be the king, Hyeonju's valet. In a Chinese restaurant out in the city, a group of high schoolers from different schools are having a meeting. They are sharing information about how Gwanyuk managed to beat the thugs of Surak High all by himself just 2 days ago. They are worried that Gwanyuk isn't done rampaging around yet, but instead will be coming for their own schools in the coming weeks ahead. Thus, one suggests to the representatives from the other schools that they should join forces and go bring down Guan High. Their meeting gets interrupted when a new high schooler enters the room. It was the top dog of Surak High who got beaten up by Gwanyuk himself just 2 days ago. He yells at the others that there are no problems that cannot be solved with money. Meanwhile, back at Guan High, Hyeonju's life as the king had just become much more nerve-wracking now that the top dog of their school, Gwanyuk, is serving him water as his butler. At first he wasn't that compliant, threatening him every time he gave him an order. But as always, Hwajin comes swooping in this time with a feather duster. He just tickles Gwanyuk's nose, making him sneeze, which moves his cracked ribs and causes him to double down in pain. Then, Hwajin just hands over the feather duster to Hyeonju and tells him to use it whenever Gwanyuk is being unruly. Gwanyuk also tried rallying the other students to go after Hwajin together, but no one listened to him. They pointed out that Gwanyuk himself got beaten up, so who is he to tell them to fight again? Gwanyuk was no longer able to reign over the others. But that wasn't the only thing that changed. Hyeonju himself noticed that the other students are now teaching each other their lessons so that they could raise their ranks. After spending 2 weeks packed together like a tin of sardines, the line between the auto and electric departments gradually faded and everyone started to get along with one another, whether it's in food or games. The principal also noticed these changes and complimented Hwajin on a job well done, especially with Gwanyuk, who is now meekly going along. However, Hwajin points out that Gwanyuk still hasn't changed. Meanwhile, Gwanyuk and Hyeonju are walking outside with Gwanyuk carrying his bags for him. Hyeonju is pondering whether Gwanyuk had really changed while Gwanyuk is just counting down the days until when his ribs will heal and he can get his revenge on Hwajin. While walking, Surak High, unfortunately, finds them and starts teasing Gwanyuk. Gwanyuk asks them why they're so confident for someone who got beaten up a couple of weeks ago, but Surak High then called out their weapons, a group of adult gangsters. Gwanyuk immediately punches the gangsters, managing to bring down 2 of them. However, the last one easily blocks his punch and delivers a powerful haymaker to his side. The gangster then mentions that it feels wrong to beat up students from his old school. After all, he was the top dog of their school 8 years ago and the former ruler of the Guan Mongol Army, aka the Great Khan. Gwanyuk can't believe that the gangster he's now facing is the legendary Great Khan of Guan. He tries to punch him, but the Great Khan just kicks him in the face, sending him back down. As a child, Gwanyuk thought he was just a normal boy. But one fateful day, a group of kids starts bad-mouthing his parents in front of Hwajin. This angers him so much that he eventually beats them all up. That's when he realized he could fight well. Everyone was soon on their knees begging for mercy. But now, he finally gets scared as a man pounds on his bloody face. He taps on the Great Khan's arm and tells him that he has won. He admits defeat and he'll never mess with the Sorok High students ever again. The Great Khan stops pounding on Hwajin and asks his employers what he should do. The Sorok High students give him a thumbs up and tell him that his job is done. However, the Great Khan speaks up and shares his opinions. For him, punks like Hwajin never say sorry and mean it. Once he's back to 100%, he'll start to stir up trouble again. Thus, the Great Khan promises for a small fee that he'll ensure that his employers will be safe until they graduate. With this statement, Hwajin can't help but cry about what's coming ahead. In a dark corner of some construction site, a gangster holds down Hwajin as the Great Khan prepares to mangle his hand beyond repair. At the side, Hwajin is quivering in the corner, brought along by the goons to keep his mouth shut. Hwajin and he never spoke a word to one another until all this, but his hierarchy system of brawls had made Hwajin's life hell for 3 years. But with the scene playing out in front of him this time, he can't help but yell at the gangsters to let him go. With his yell, he throws his body over Hwajin, protecting him from the boot about to stomp on his hand. The Great Khan asks him to move, and when he doesn't, he starts beating him up instead. Hwajin himself can't understand why Hwajin is protecting him when they didn't really know each other. Meanwhile, the beating had elevated Hwajin's heart rate tracked by his watch and sent a report to no other than Hwajin. A while later, the Great Khan himself is amazed at Hwajin, since he's still standing up even though he's been beating on him for 10 whole minutes. He asks him why he's doing this when he's clearly not friends with Hwajin, but Hwajin explains that there are still limits. At that moment, Hwajin finally arrives and faces the gangsters. Hwajin explains what's happening to him, which is further reinforced when the gangsters threaten Hwajin. In response, Hwajin quickly takes 2 of them down, exclaiming that he's thrilled to be fighting adults since he can finally let off some steam. Since the Great Khan knows that Hwajin is a good fighter based on how he defeated his 2 companions earlier, he pulls out a knife. However, Hwajin loses his smile and tells him to put it away. If he doesn't, then he'd have to treat this as a battle, not a brawl. The Great Khan doesn't listen to him and charges him with the knife instead. Thus, Hwajin gets into a stance and swats the knife away. He swats all his attacks and disarms the Great Khan. He then delivers a punch and sweeps him off his feet at the same time. As Hwajin pounds on his face, the Great Khan realizes that Hwajin is probably one of those people who knows martial arts designed for special forces, Krav Maga. The Great Khan hugs Hwajin's feet and begs him not to kill him. He promises to stop being a gangster anymore. But when Hwajin still doesn't stop, he apologizes and begs Hwajin instead to stop him, promising to pay him a lot of money. This makes Hwajin stop and tells him that what he's doing is correct. Not paying people but apologizing to the people he hurt. Afterward, Hwajin lets him go. After he's gone, Hwajin approaches the beat-up Hwajin and tells him that how the Great Khan acted is how he's been acting the whole time in school. The next day, Hwajin formally left Guan Tech. Thus, the auto and electric department banded together to do what they promised to do once he left, the execution of their king, Hwajin. However, Hwajin suddenly barges in on their gathering and tells everyone that whoever lays a finger on his friend Hwajin will answer to him. Everyone leaves the gym, confused as to why Hwajin is suddenly defending Hwajin. Meanwhile, Hwajin is remembering the lesson Hwajin taught him last night. He was using his muscles to crush people weaker than him, and he was never going to learn unless he first learned what it was like to be on the other side. Hwajin then tells him that if the thugs weren't there, he would have done the same thing to Hwajin to make him realize this. And thanks to Hwajin, it didn't escalate. Most people would have just sat there and watched him lose his hand, but Hwajin put his life on the line to protect him. Hwajin tells Hwajin that people aren't measured by their strength, but by their character. And if Hwajin still doesn't learn that, then he'll be back to teach his lesson again. Thus, Hwajin saves Hwajin from his execution and walks away. Before he leaves, he clarifies to Hwajin that he didn't save him as payback for saving him last night, but because Hwajin looked awesome last night. After that day, Hwajin was able to graduate without getting bullied anymore. Hwajin didn't get in a single fight for the rest of his time in high school and instead focused on preparing and training for his future. Each of them went their own separate ways. 10 years later, they even ended up working side by side at the same automotive company. Back in the present, Hwajin had just come back to the Ministry of Education, but what was waiting for him was a stack of reports. Gangster explains to him that even when the nation is still on the fence about corporal punishment, it seems like requests for help just keep coming in. Hwajin reads one report and is surprised at the chaos unfolding in just one school. The school is Soyeon High School for girls. Hwajin is on the fence about going to a girls' school, but Gangsuk explains that he knew this was going to happen. Thus, he already scouted a capable woman for the job, and enters their new recruit, Hanrim. Hwajin is taken aback because he recognized her from his military days. At the same time, Hanrim laughs as she gets to work again with her team leader who went MIA. Meanwhile, in Soyeon High, a teacher is getting bullied by his students. One girl waves an electric razor at his hair, wanting to shave his head. The teacher tries to fight back, but the girl just laughs and tells him that touching her has very grave consequences. The faculty members of Soyeon High are shocked when their co-teacher enters with his hair shaved and cut short. They already know who the culprits are, but the law stops them from doing anything. One teacher observes that the students are getting bolder after the incident, but another teacher quickly shushes him since one of their coworkers is still traumatized by it. The teacher they were talking about is Miss Sun-young, who was lifelessly preparing for her next class. Miss Sun-young enters her classroom and tells the students to open their textbooks, but no one heeds her. To the students of Seon High, she is a ghost. Meanwhile, Hwajin and Hanrim are catching up with each other's lives, with Hwajin complaining that he didn't recognize her since she dyed her hair red. They then went separate ways, with Hanrim going to her new assignment as a new teacher in Soyeon High. She's assigned to be Miss Sun-young's assistant, who just warned her to keep her head down. When Miss Sun-young tried to introduce Hanrim to her class, Hanrim was astonished to notice that the class was using a stonewalling tactic to ostracize Miss Sun-young. Whoever breaks the tactic will be made the next target, so every student is forced to play along. Only one person can break it, the ringleader, and just as she expected, a haughty-looking girl named Yuri raises her hand and compliments Hanrim's hair. Yuri then implied that Hanrim probably had plastic surgery, and following her lead, the other students started piling veiled insults at Hanrim. However, instead of following Miss Sun-young's advice to keep a low profile, Hanrim retorts back at the students with insults of her own. Thus, the class ends with the students annoyed at their new teacher, and Yuri wickedly smiling, promising to have fun playing with Hanrim. Outside the school building, Miss Sun-young scolds Hanrim for not following her advice. When Hanrim tries to defend herself by stating that students shouldn't be disrespectful to their teachers, Miss Sun-young tells her that she doesn't know what she's talking about and that she doesn't know how wicked kids are these days. At that moment, Hanrim notices a flower pot falling right on top of them, and she pulls Miss Sun-young out of the way. She then quietly whispers to Miss Sun-young that she is aware and that she's sent by the TRPA. As they gaze up above to where Hanrim is standing from the place where the flower pot came from, Hanrim asks Miss Sun-young to tell her what happened at their school. Miss Sun-young explains that in the past, the original homeroom teacher of her class was a teacher named Mr. Yong-soo. Mr. Yong-soo believed that there are no bad students and always saw the best in everyone. However, his trouble started when he got Yuri in his class. One day, Mr. Yong-soo confronted Yuri after he found Yuri smoking cigarettes. Yuri tried to deny it, but Mr. Yong-soo told her he would let it go as long as she promised to stop. Yuri did, with a smile on her face. However, the next day, the principal told Mr. Yong-soo that someone reported him to be flirting with his underage student. Thus, the school was forced to dismiss him. Unable to bear the fact that a student would accuse him and how others now see him, Mr. Yong-soo ultimately took his own life. In an interrogation, a student who was Yuri's friend confessed that she was the one who reported him because she heard him and Yuri flirting in the classroom, so she reported it. Yuri, however, explains that she and Mr. Yong-soo were just joking around. It was their MO to pretend something was a joke or a misunderstanding so they could wipe their conscience clean. Back in the present, Hanrim enters her classroom to find the students surprising her with a cake as an apology for their bad behavior. They asked her to blow out the candles, but when she leaned over, they tried to push the cake to her face. Hanrim's quickly reacted and sends the cake flying over to Yuri's head. Yuri's head starts to bleed, and she threatens to report Hanrim. Hanrim, however, just looks at her and quickly slams her head into the table. She asks her why there were hidden razors in the blades. She then finally reveals that she's from the TRPA. Later, Hanrim is letting off some steam in her gym when Hwajin arrives to ask her how her mission's doing. Hwajin is about to give her some advice, but Hanrim tells him that he can just leave it to her. After all, she also went to a girls' high school before, so she knows how girls like Yuri think. At school, Yuri's friends are freaking out that the TRPA is at their school. Yuri advises them to just act like usual since, according to her research, the TRPA only stays around 2 weeks at their assigned school. In the meantime, she texts everyone that they're going to ignore Hanrim for those 2 weeks. Unfortunately for her, Hanrim is standing right behind her and tells her that it's up to the discretion of the TRPA warden on how long they plan to stay. She then confiscates Yuri's phone and her classmates. Not only that, but during classes, every teacher calls on Yuri to answer their questions, which infuriates her to no end. She screams out why she's being gauged on when she clearly doesn't know the answers, but Hanrim, watching from the back, answers why she seems to be so proud of being stupid. Yuri walks up to her and asks if she has any evidence that she messed with the teachers in the first place. Hanrim, in response, forces her to kneel and asks her if she has any evidence herself that the teachers are ganging up on her. She then announces a new rule: every time someone misbehaves, the whole class gets punished. Later, the girls are in the bathroom complaining about how they must live for 2 weeks under Hanrim's tyranny. An idea comes into Yuri's head, and she starts slapping her friend. With her friend's face now black and blue, she tells her to call her mother and report that Hanrim had hurt them. Later, a mother barges into the room and slaps Hanrim. She starts berating her for hurting her daughter and that she'll get her fired. However, Hanrim calmly just slaps her back and tells her that she can complain all she wants to the Minister of Education. In the back, Yuri is infuriated that Hanrim can't be stopped. 10 days later, Miss Sunyan observes that Yuri had changed. Of course, she didn't submit to Hanrim's authority right away and even continued her mastermind plans. After their phones got banned, Yuri tried to pass out her plans using notes. But when Hanrim caught them, she made all the second-year students do punishments in the yard. One day, Yuri is in the bathroom annoyed that all her plans are getting foiled by Hanrim. While there, she overhears the other students complaining not about the Hanrim, but about her. They resent Yuri for causing so much trouble that the TRPA is now at their school and is making their lives a living hell. In the blink of an eye, all the students at the school started to blame Yuri for the TRPA's methods, and Yuri, who had once ruled the school like its queen, had become lower than dirt. In Hanrim's next meeting with Hwajin, she reports that her job might end soon, but Hwajin reminds her to be careful since if Yuri's really that easy to break, then the school wouldn't have called the TRPA in the first place. Meanwhile, Miss Sunyoung is walking home thinking how maybe Yuri can really change for the better. When she reaches her house, she sees Yuri crying by her front door. She's asking for Miss Sunyoung's help and how to apologize to her friends. Miss Sunyoung remembers her predecessor, Mr. Yangsu's words that all students can change, and she helps Yuri enter her house to talk. However, just as she opens the door, Yuri suddenly grabs her by the head and pushes her inside. Yuri's accomplice then shows up, and they start interrogating Miss Sunyoung. They know that on the TRPA's website, anyone can submit anonymous tips, which means that they had to be tipped off by someone to come to their school. Yuri believes that Miss Sunyoung is the one who tattled to the TRPA, and her friends pull out some box cutters and scissors to threaten Miss Sunyoung. Miss Sunyoung realizes that Mr. Yangsu is wrong, and it seems that there are students who really are monsters. Suddenly, someone bangs on Miss Sunyoung's door. It was her neighbor complaining about all the noises in the apartment. Yuri shouts at the neighbor to mind her own business, but the neighbor answers and calls Yuri by name to open the door. It was Hanrim, and if they didn't let her in that instant, she'd break the door down and make them regret it for the rest of their lives. A few weeks ago, it turns out that Hanrim moved to Miss Sunyoung's apartment complex after receiving her assignment at their school. She explains that she needed a place to stay while working, and it happened to be close to the school. It's only a coincidence that they became neighbors. But the truth was Hanrim and Hwajin both know that when students like Yuri failed in trying to trouble Hanrim, they would probably target the one who ratted on them in the first place. And that is most probably the person she thinks she was cruelest to. In this case, this was Miss Sunyoung, and that's why Hanrim moved in right next to her. Back in the present, Hanrim starts counting down to force Yuri to open the door. Meanwhile, her friends are shocked and panicking about what they should do. Miss Sunyoung looks at Yuri and tells her that she's willing to tell Hanrim that she invited her over for counseling, and they can just pretend that the whole thing never happened. All Yuri needs to do is open the door. However, Yuri just creepily smiles at her and believes that this only confirms that Miss Sunyoung was the one who ratted on her. She grabbed the box cutter knife from her unsuspecting friend and tried to stab Miss Sunyoung with it. Thankfully, her friend quickly tackled her and asked her what she was doing. They were planning to just threaten Miss Sun-young, not hurt her. In response, Yeri swipes the knife and wounds her friend in the arm. Miss Sun-young immediately goes to help the injured student while Yeri's other friend quickly opens the door and lets Hanrim in. Seeing Hanrim, Yeri quickly dashes to the balcony and jumps out. She tries to run away while Hanrim jumps after her. Yeri spots a couple of policemen walking around, and she quickly runs over to them and cries out that a woman is trying to kill her. She pretends to cry, prompting the police officers to protect her and confront Hanrim. Hanrim tries to explain that she's a teacher, but she can't show them any ID. Meanwhile, Yeri is smiling at her from behind the policemen's backs. She runs away again, and Hanrim was forced to dodge the police officers and run right after her. Back in the apartment, Miss Sun-young performed first aid on the injured student. She then asks them if Yeri had always been this way. The student narrates that Yeri used to be a good kid. She was smart, outgoing, and popular. That is, until that one incident in middle school. Meanwhile, Hanrim manages to catch up with Yeri on a rooftop and confronts her for the crime she just did. However, instead of finally giving up, Yeri had another idea, a way to truly end Hanrim and the TRPA. Yeri chose to fall back out of the rooftop and into the streets below.